I felt like Jonah in the belly of a large metal whale as the windowless transport truck rumbled along the highway. But unlike Jonah, I had company. There were 7 other people in the truck, 5 men and 2 women. As the only one without expensive gear and weapons, I still felt like the odd man out. And the banter between members of the Zealots Mobile Task Force only reinforced the notion. The man seated across from me, of East Indian descent and sporting a Tillich symbol on his forehead, laughed at something his neighbor said, and then turned to study me with his dark eyes.
"What did you do to end up in the orange jumpsuit?"
he asked. I looked at him and thought about my answer for a moment.
"I violated one of the 10 commandments." "Which one?"
he asked. I ignored his question.
"What does that symbol on your forehead mean?"
I asked, even though I knew full well what it meant. The man smiled.
"It's a way to be closer to Vishnu, much like that cross you wear around your neck."
He pointed to the golden necklace I wore. I brought my hand up and twisted the item between thumb and forefinger.
"Yeah, plus it protects him against evil spirits,"
a white man named Merrill said in a joking tone. I'd gleaned his name from conversation during the ride.
"Evil spirits isn't the way I would put it,"
the Indian American man said.
"But he's kind of right. What's your name?"
I asked.
"Kor,"
he said, reaching a hand out.
"Mobley,"
I said.
"Father Mobley,"
Merrill said.
"Isn't that right?" "Not anymore,"
I said.
"Not for a long time." "Father?"
Kor asked.
"That's a first. How does a priest come to be a D-class in the SCP Foundation? You must have done something pretty bad to end up here."
I continued spinning the cross hanging off my necklace. Kor waited for an answer that wasn't coming. Suddenly realizing that all other conversations had stopped, I grew uneasy. The truck made a turn, bumping onto what felt like a dirt road.
"You're not really going to tell?"
Kor asked.
"Nothing to tell,"
I said.
"Ah, bullshit,"
Merrill said.
"If you won't tell them, I will. I gotta look at your file. If it were up to me, I would give you $1 million in a handshake and send you on your way, Father."
I glared at the man, but he took no notice.
"The suspense is killing me."
Another one of the zealots said as the truck came to a stop.
"Okay, I'll tell you,"
Merrill said. Then he stopped and put a finger to the earpiece in his left ear.
"Enough screwing around,"
he said after a moment.
"We're here."
Everyone groaned as they piled out of the truck. I was the last to get out, following Kor. It was dark out, and we were parked about 100 yards away from a small and run-down 1-story farmhouse. There was a flurry of activity all around. Foundation officials were busy setting up a perimeter. Strange instruments were being unloaded and calibrated by scientists. Huge lights on tripods stood in a circle around the farmhouse, blasting the structure with white light. I peered around, following the zealots to a meeting area where Commander Neville stood, shouting for everyone to gather up. There were 8 total zealots, not counting the commander. 7 had been in the back with me, while 1 drove the truck. Commander Neville sat up front and tried to get as much information as he could while we'd been traveling. I was under no illusion as to why I was here. I knew exactly what D-class personnel were used for in these situations. Hell, I'd volunteered for the job. Ever since I had violated that most sacred of commandments, a war had been raging in my mind. On the other hand, I knew that there was never an excuse to do what I'd done. On the other hand, I knew I would do it again if I were placed in the same situation. I would do it again 100,000 times, because it had seemed so right at the time. I'm not saying it felt good. Not at all. It felt terrible. But it was the right thing to do. I had been certain of that at the time, and I was certain of it now. But I was tired of that battle. I was tired of wondering how I could hold such conflicting beliefs in my head at the same time. I wanted to go home and be judged by God. I wanted to be sentenced to eternity in heaven or damnation. I knew which one I was hoping for, but I didn't think I would get my wish. Still, I just wanted the conflict I'd been carrying around to be over. Maybe tonight's the night, I thought.
I'm sure you holier-than-thou bastards are wondering why I had you load your weapons with silver bullets.
Commander Neville shouted as we all formed up in a circle around him.
Because we're hunting werewolves, sir.
Merrill said.
Use your head, Sergeant.
Neville said.
Would they need the most elite and spiritual fighting force in the SCP Foundation just to find some pussy-ass werewolves? Hell no!
Came the shouted answer from the zealots.
That's right. We're here because we have God on our side, no matter what name he or she goes by. Now, the local sheriff who discovered this anomaly said that prayer and silver bullets do the trick with the freaky black bastards that come out of that house behind me. I don't have to tell you twice that when you pray, you better mean it. Because if you don't, those bullets won't mean jack squat in a pile of dirty drawers. You got me? Yes, sir!
The zealots shouted.
Good. Now I need 4 volunteers. Who wants to go in first?
I raised my hand, but so did all the zealots. Neville didn't even look at me as he picked his 4. Merrill was among them, and he slapped my back.
Sorry, Padre. Maybe next time,
he said, grinning. From what I'd heard, many task forces used D-class people as guinea pigs before they sent any of their own people into a potentially dangerous situation. But it wasn't hard to see that these men and women were too proud for such a thing. The 4 chosen zealots started checking their gear over and discussing things with the commander. Maybe tonight's the night, I thought, looking up at the spilled light of the cosmos overhead. With all the activity upon our arrival, I had managed to ignore the disquieting feeling I had since setting foot on the property. But now, as I walked toward the front of the house with the zealots, that ominous feeling grew. It felt as if I was being watched from everywhere at once, and whoever was doing the watching had anything but good intentions. The zealots seemed to feel this too, because they all fell quiet as the group split up. Myself and the 4 remaining zealots stood near one of the light stands with the commander, while the other 4 approached the farmhouse. The 1-story structure was gray with age, and the windows were covered in grime so thick you couldn't see inside. Merrill and the 3 others split into 2 pairs and went either way around the house. 10 minutes later, the 4 of them appeared from around the side and approached the rest of us.
Looks like a normal farmhouse, sir,
Merrill said.
But for the fact that there's no way to get to the entryway from inside, there's no room containing that front door. Not that we could find.
Neville nodded his craggy head.
That confirms what the forward team said. I guess there's only one way to open the door, and it's from the outside. You guys still up for it? Hell yeah!
The chosen 4 shouted.
Fucking A,
Neville said.
Whenever you're ready.
Any Foundation employee without a gun retreated away from the house, while anyone with a sidearm moved forward, getting ready in case holy hell was unleashed when they opened the door. I was the only one without a weapon standing among the armed, watching intently. The chosen 4 approached and grouped together outside the front door. They communicated with words I couldn't hear and with gestures I couldn't decipher. Then Merrill stepped forward and shoved the door open, moving out of the way so the other 3 would have a clear shot. The door opened to reveal a rectangle of blackness so complete and depthless that it was dizzying to peer into. It was like a hole in the universe, the absence of everything. But nothing came out of that blackness, so the chosen 4 went in. They each went through, disappearing as if swallowed by a pool of pure black as they stepped over the threshold.
Sergeant, can you hear me?
Commander Neville said.
Do you read me? Shit, we lost radio contact.
Everyone waited, watching the black rectangle. The door, since it opened inward, had disappeared into that blackness as soon as Merrill had thrown it open, and it remained open. Minutes passed. No sound came from the house. People stationed around the perimeter reported no movement through the side or back windows. Neville tried repeatedly to re-establish radio contact, but nothing was working. Time ticked on. 10 minutes, 15.
Okay, that's it,
Neville said.
You, Mobley, come here.
I nodded and came over.
You're going in. We're going to attach a line to you so we can yank you back out again and get your report. Got me?
I nodded.
With all due respect, Commander, I would rather go in myself,
Kor said. The other 3 zealots piped up, saying they wanted to go.
These are our men. Let us go get them. And suppose you don't come back out either?
Neville asked. Kor shrugged.
So be it. You all feel the same way?
Neville asked. Everyone nodded.
Fine, but I'm still sending the D in with you. And you're all wearing lines, by God.
Kor smiled.
Yes, sir. I'll go first,
I said, moving up toward the black rectangle.
No way,
Kor said, shooting an arm out.
I'm going first.
We all wore harnesses with strong ropes fixed to them at the back. The ropes were attached to machines that would wind them in with the press of a button. Without so much as a moment's hesitation, Kor stepped through the door. He was followed by O'Brien, Jones, and then Matheson. I felt a strange sense of comfort staring into that doorway. I was scared. That was only normal. But the rectangle made me think that maybe there was nothing after death. Maybe it was just black. That would mean that I wouldn't have to spend eternity in hell. But it would also mean that the God I'd devoted my life to was just a fallacy made up by men thousands of years ago. That would be a kind of hell in itself. I stepped through and into a farmhouse living room. The 4 zealots were there, pointing their underbarrel flashlights around. The place looked normal. There was some rotting furniture, a couple of lamps, and an ancient television. Glancing behind me, I saw that the black rectangle wasn't there at the door. I could see out, but it wasn't normal out there. There was no sign of all the Foundation employees. There was only a strange, wavy landscape that seemed to go on forever. The ropes, however, seemed to end right at the threshold, as if they were magically floating in the air. Then they all went momentarily taut before falling into the living room.
Well, shit,
Kor said, grabbing his few feet of rope in one hand.
There goes that plan.
All the zealots were looking back toward me, toward the door. I glanced at their faces, seeing no discernible fear or concern. A humanoid shadow appeared behind Matheson, who was near a doorway that led into what looked like a dining room.
Behind you!
I shouted, pointing. Before Matheson could turn around, the shadow creature stepped up and shoved a clawed hand through her back, yanking it out a moment later with a beating heart held between its sharp, jet-black fingers. Matheson fell to the floor, while O'Brien fired his weapon at the retreating creature.
Motherfucker!
Jones yelled, firing as well. They didn't hit the thing. It was gone just as quickly as it had come. Kor ran over and pulled Matheson's body away from the doorway. He felt for a pulse as the other 2 stopped firing.
She's dead,
he said.
Look at this,
O'Brien said, shining his light at the wall over the couch. 2 words had been scrawled there in what looked like long-dried blood. Lights out.
The hell does that mean?
Jones asked. As if to answer his question, another of those shadow creatures emerged from the next room, seeming to solidify as it came into the light from Jones's flashlight. Jones fired at it, and the thing disappeared into a puff of yellowish dust that smelled of sulfur.
Were you praying?
Kor asked.
Hell yes, I was,
Jones said.
See how it got more solid in the light?
O'Brien asked.
Let's turn off our flashlights and try our nods. Good idea,
Kor said. They all shut off their flashlights and pulled their night optic devices down from their helmets. Once they had them on, they peered around.
What the hell is this?
O'Brien said, stepping over to the front wall of the house, near the door. There was a black hole about the diameter of a bowling ball there. He crouched in front of it and reached his fingers toward it.
O'Brien,
Kor warned. But the other man had already stuck the tip of his gloved index finger into the large hole. He grunted as his entire arm was yanked in, slamming his head and body into the wall. He screamed.
Something's got me!
We all ran over and grabbed hold of him, yanking on his opposite arm, his harness, and his belt. We couldn't even get him to budge. Whatever was pulling him into the hole was incredibly strong. O'Brien screamed in pain as he was pulled farther in. I heard his ribs cracking against the wall. His neck snapped and folded sideways as he was pulled farther into the hole. Blood exploded from his torso. His bones snapped and skin split. Then he was gone. The only thing left was his rifle on the floor and his blood all over the place. I looked down at my orange jumpsuit to see his hemoglobin staining the thick fabric.
This is too much,
Jones said, stepping toward the door.
I can't do this. I'm going back.
He moved through the still open front door and into that strange, wavy landscape that stretched on into infinity.
Jones, God damn it!
Cor called.
Get back here!
But Jones was running away from us. His footsteps sent turbulent waves out, like slow-motion ripples on a pond's surface. Then he began to slow, and something started happening to his body. At first, I thought it was just the wavy nature of that world, whatever it was. But I soon realized that wasn't it. No, Jones was melting. As Cor and I watched, his body turned to what looked like hot wax, and then tiny white skulls popped up through his skin as he melted away. The skulls blew up like bubbles and then popped, eventually coalescing with the rest of Jones's body as a wavy puddle on what amounted to the floor. When there was nothing left to see, I reached out and grabbed the doorknob, and I shut the door. Cor and I looked at each other.
We're not getting out of here alive,
I said.
I know,
Cor said, although he spoke in a way that made me think he still had hope. I stepped over and picked up O'Brien's rifle.
Let's see if we can do some good before we move on to the next life.
Cor nodded and swallowed.
You can take Matheson's night optics device.
I shook my head.
Somehow, I don't think it will be of any help. But keep yours on just in case. That way we have both bases covered.
We were in agreement, and we set off to explore the farmhouse. It was much more than just a farmhouse. We were currently in a corridor that looked like the employees' area of a mall. We were surrounded by concrete walls and black metal doors. Since leaving the living room and dining room area, we'd gone through several other rooms that seemed like they'd been tacked on as an afterthought. There was a child's bedroom from the 1970s, a storage room with paint and industrial cleaning supplies, and a kitchen that would have been at home in a fancy mountain getaway. As we made our way through these rooms, we found the bodies of all 4 zealots who had gone in before us. 3 of them seemed unharmed, so their hearts had surely been ripped out. The last one, Merrill, had taken his own life by shooting himself in the heart. 2 of his fingers had been cut open and were coated in blood, so we guessed he'd been the one to write "Lights Out" on the living room wall. Cor figured we were in some sort of alternate dimension, or that there was some kind of transport function at work that took us to these various rooms around the world. Whenever we encountered a window or a door that led outside, it always opened onto that strange wavy landscape that had taken Jones. We didn't dare venture out there. At each room we came to, Cor shot out any lights that happened to be on, plunging the rooms into darkness. This seemed to keep the creatures at bay, although they appeared on half a dozen occasions, usually in the rooms we could see into, but hadn't yet entered because of the light. So long as we stayed in the darkness, they never attacked. Cor had taken Matheson's spare magazines, so we still had a good amount of ammo left as we approached the brightest room yet. It was at the end of the mall corridor, and the light blazed through 2 vertical windows in a set of double doors. We paused as Cor took aim and shot out the last fluorescent tube light before the double doors. Then we moved forward, trying to stay out of the light from the windows while still looking through to see what was on the other side.
What in the hell is that?
Cor asked as he looked through the left window while I looked through the right. The large room beyond was roughly circular and had double doors surrounding it on all sides. A ton of lamps, candles, and flashlights had been set around the place, bringing every nook and cranny into stark relief. In the middle of the room was a small mountain of pulsating hearts. Human hearts. I had to swallow my disgust as I looked at the glistening organs. They had all been ripped open, but they beat nonetheless. A shadow creature moved into the room from the set of doors across the way. Both Cor and I flinched, but we kept watching. The creature had a heart and 1 inky claw, which it tossed onto the pile. Suddenly, 24 shadow creatures appeared and stood around the pile of hearts. The heart that had just been added was still beating, but it bulged and flexed as though something was trying to get out of it. The tough muscle ripped, and another one of those raven-black creatures crawled from it, birthed from inside the heart. Once it was out, it seemed to stretch and look around at its companions. Then it went off through a set of doors, no doubt to search for another heart. Soon, the other black creatures moved off, leaving the pile of hearts unprotected.
The bastards are multiplying,
Kor said. I said nothing and raised my free hand to the golden cross at my neck and felt the symbol. It buzzed between my fingers, like it was conducting electricity.
There's a lot of light in there, and I don't think those things have gone far,
Kor said.
I don't see how we can shoot all the lights out before they attack us, much less shoot all those creatures.
I shook my head.
There's no way shooting will work, so there's only one thing to do. What?
Remember that storage closet we went through? I asked.
Yeah.
There was acetone in there. Kor looked back into the room at one of the many candles there. Then he looked back at me and smiled grimly. When we were back at the set of double doors again, I held 2 cans of acetone in my hands. Kor held both rifles, one in each hand, stocks clamped in his armpits. An empty can of acetone lay nearby. I had used it to soak both of us in the chemical.
Ready to do this?
I asked.
Hell no,
he said.
So, let's do it.
I nodded.
Wait,
Kor said.
Just tell me one thing before we go in there. What? If you were really a priest, how'd you end up in prison?
Sighing, I looked at Kor's deeply brown eyes.
I happened upon one of my fellow priests with a small child.
Kor's eyes went wide.
And when I saw him with that little boy, I lost it completely. As soon as I got the child out of the room, I beat the man to death. I beat him until he wasn't recognizable as a man anymore. And then I beat him some more. When I was done, his outsides matched his insides.
Kor blew a breath out.
And they gave you life for that?
I nodded.
Why? I refused to apologize for what I'd done. I told the judge I would do it again the same way. He said that our society cannot allow vigilante justice. And he was right. What I did was wrong. But it was right at the same time. Do you understand? Yeah,
Kor said sadly.
I understand that.
I figured you might. The smell of acetone was getting to me.
Let's do this. Let's fucking go!
Kor shouted, moving forward, kicking the doors open. The creatures came from every set of doors on all sides of the large room as we entered. Dozens of them. Hundreds. As many as the number of hearts in the middle of the room. Shouting, Kor fired both weapons, killing creatures with prayer and silver bullets. I ran directly for the pile of hearts and upended both the acetone cans, pouring the highly flammable liquid on the still beating organs. It splashed all over my hands and down my forearms. I didn't care. I was already soaked in the stuff. That was the most important part of the plan, so they couldn't take our hearts. The black creatures were closing in, focusing on me as they came. I felt bullets zip past me while Kor fired, keeping the attackers away as long as he could. But it wasn't enough. There were too many of them. I tossed both cans down before they were half empty, and then sprinted for the nearest candle. A creature stepped in front of the candle and reached into my chest. I felt it seize my heart just a moment before a bullet crashed through its body and it disappeared in a puff of sulfur dust. Breathing heavily and half amazed that my heart was still working, I reached down and stuck my fingers into the candle flame. The acetone on my arm lit immediately, the flames whooshing up my arm and crawling all over my acetone-soaked body. I turned and ran back toward the pile of hearts.
I'm out!
Kor screamed a moment after the gunfire stopped.
See you on the other side!
I shouted, already feeling the flames of eternal damnation scorching my skin. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Kor sprinting toward the pile of hearts. Dozens of the creatures closed in behind him, reaching out for his chest. I was covered in flames now, but the cross at my neck felt cool on my burning skin. Kor and I reached the pile of hearts at the same time. We both jumped, hitting the pile. The acetone I had poured lit with an almost explosive ferocity. Soon, I couldn't breathe. The pain was becoming too great. But before I passed out, I heard a chorus of horrific screams. At first, I thought they were the screams of the damned waiting for me in hell. Then I realized that the shadow creatures were doing the screaming. As I died, I managed to form a smile at a job well done. SCP-1983-1 is a one-story farmhouse in Wyoming. It was abandoned in 1968 after a series of ritual murders allegedly performed by a satanic cult. The front door of the farmhouse, when opened, appears to contain a spatial anomaly. Neither matter nor light has been observed to exit the doorway, save for instances of SCP-1983-2. SCP-1983-2 are bipedal creatures approximately 5 feet 9 inches tall. They are vaguely humanoid and entirely black in color. They are highly aggressive and will engage any human on sight. When an instance of SCP-1983-2 comes into contact with a human, they extend an upper limb into the human's chest cavity, without any apparent damage to skin or tissues. Through unknown means, they then extract the heart, killing the human. Silver munitions fired while offering prayer is the only known method of killing these anomalies. The precise form of the prayer or religion of the supplicant does not appear to matter, so long as the prayer is sincere. Once killed, the bodies of SCP-1983-2 appear to disintegrate, leaving a small layer of sulfur. Hey guys, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more SCP stories like this one. You can also check out some more episodes from the SCP Experience podcast here. I'll see you in the next one.